Hitchin TV video production.
Well, I'll give you the abridged version because it's a long old story really. I was running, I had my own business in the 80s and 90s down in Berkshire, and in the last very horrible recession of the early 1990s, we formed something called a traders association in Wokingham in Berkshire to deal with the local authority. As in so many of these things, they started out as attrition because we were complaining about car park charges. How strange is that? Life turns full circle. But we actually found that when we got together with the local authority that there were more issues in common than there were sort of against. So we formed a partnership in Wokingham, Wokingham Town Centre Management Partnership. And that's really where it began. My business unfortunately then failed in that recession of the early 90s, but I carried on my interest in town centres, and then in about 1995 they asked me if I would run town centre management in Wokingham, but on a voluntary basis. So I said I could only do it for 2 years because we've all got to earn money, and as I was coming towards the end of that 2 years, I happened to buy a Sunday newspaper, not just any one, and there was an advert in it for Hitchin Town Centre Manager, and I looked down and I thought, well, I'm doing all that at the moment on a voluntary basis, why not start to get back into the workplace and make this my sort of initial application to get back into the market. So I've been fortunate enough to turn what started as a hobby, really, I suppose, into a profession. When we started Town Centre Management in Wokingham, there were probably only 20 or 30 around the country, and that boomed and boomed and boomed over the years. Hitchin was quite a forerunner really, because it was, I think it was one of the first in Hertfordshire, certainly, and it was certainly one of the first towns of its size to bring in a full-time town centre manager. North Herts District Council, to their enduring credit, offered to seek or fund the post for the first 3 years on the understanding that businesses would eventually match it over that period of time. And of course, I mean, that's way back in history, we've fast surpassed that now. Anyway, I applied for the job and I was shortlisted for interview. I came up here, I think, in the March of 1997 to have a look round, because I'd never stopped in Hertfordshire before. It was only ever the place you drove through on the M1 as you were heading north. Drove into town one Sunday afternoon to have a good look round before my interview, which was going to be on the Thursday, and thought I would be very fortunate if I were to be offered this town. There were a lot of similarities between Wokingham and Hitchin, similar sizes, old historic market towns, same sorts of issues affecting them. And then, sure enough, at the end of the day, they offered me the job after the interview, and I was delighted to come up here. I then had to find somewhere to live, because I'm a great believer in that town centre managers can't be a 9 till 5 commute type job. You have to immerse yourself in the community, and I was fortunate enough to find the flat above Barclays Bank. Again, that was an interesting little story, because it was advertised in the local paper at the time, in I think the Comet, which I'd taken back home to Berkshire with me to start looking for accommodation. Phoned up about the flat and they said, oh, well, like all good estate agents said, yeah, but we've got about 9 people coming to see it this weekend, so by the time you come up and see it again, it may already have gone. So I just felt that it was a sign, really. So I phoned up the following morning and transferred I think a month's or a quarter's rent to him, and took the flat unseen, which was unheard of in those days, but well, probably in these days as well. But I ended up living there for 18 of the 20 years. So I've only recently, about 2.5 years ago, I moved down to Bucklersbury. So still very much in the heart of the town. Well, there have been huge changes in every high street, no less than in Hitchin. But I think that the great thing about Hitchin is it's been able to react, if you like, to changing trends in retailing and socialising and everything else. I've always believed, it's always been my philosophy in life, throughout town centre management, that towns were about so much more than retailing. You know, a town centre has to be a place where people socialise, where there are lots of other services, where they can be entertained. It's the whole concept, you know, so we have an advantage in that we have historic buildings, we have nice open air spaces, we have a community that's buzzy and vibrant, whereas there are some soulless concrete towns not too far from us, mentioning no names, that are disadvantaged in that respect. We've all seen the growth of coffee shops, of beauty salons, of hairdressers, and these have taken hold because of the huge growth in online retailing. Whereas 20 years ago the concern was about out-of-town retailing, the growth in online retailing has been nothing short of stunning. Well, strangely, when I first came here and started going around to all the community groups, talking to them and introducing myself and everything else, I used to end the talk with, okay, I'm now going to give you 3 sticks of dynamite. Which are the 3 buildings you'd most like to blow up in the town centre? And the 3 that topped the list nearly every time were the old Safeway building, which is now Wilkinson's. Apologies, Wilkinson's. Everybody loves you, but not the building you're in. What was the Crown House down in Bridge Street. I sometimes think they wanted it blown up though because it was the home of the Inland Revenue, but that has now gone and become residential. And of course Churchgate. And Churchgate was an issue in 1997 for people, and it still is. I mean, I've got old historic newspaper cuttings going back from before I was here. I think it was first mentioned, a councillor saying we should do something about Churchgate back in about 1983, you know, even only a dozen years or so after it had been actually built. But there are many historic towns around the country that have this seemingly out of place development right in the middle, where perhaps in the late 60s, early 70s, growth of new towns, those sorts of things, town centres said we need to build something to make us competitive for the next century. And of course here we are in the next century going, what the heck did they ever build that for? So Churchgate is probably still one I'd like to see dealt with. I think parking is an increasing problem in this town, and we need to get a holistic solution to that, not just piecemeal. It's not just about jacking up prices to try and deter people from parking at certain times in certain car parks. It needs to be thought about in a rational way so that we satisfy not just the shopper, but the increasing number of people who live in the town centre now who don't have parking, and also those who work in the town centre. Invariably, you know, particularly in the retail and service sector, they're not desperately well paid above minimum wage. If you then got to start paying £5 or £6 a day out of your after-tax income to park, it's not satisfactory. And the more we bring in residents' parking permits, understandably, the more people are pushed further and further out to park. Station's a big issue, commuter parking at the station. There are, oh gosh, I could go on, there are so many projects still for us to address, you know. That's a very difficult one really, because, you know, when you start thinking about it, and because we've just done the office move, you start tripping over old diaries, photographs, programmes from events. So it takes you twice as long to move because nostalgia is a big thing. Queen's visit, obviously, 2012 Jubilee visit was huge for us. I think it was such a perfect day. So that was really good. I was very fortunate, of course, to get the MBE 2 years later, so that was big for me as well. And also personally for me, the Town Centre Manager of the Year award in 2005, where we bizarrely, I think, beat Swansea and Belfast in the final, which was quite a surprise. The Thames Trek in 2004. Walked 220 miles raising money for town centre projects. I think we raised about 21,000. So we've had some good fundraisers. Hitchin Festival continues to thrill me, particularly the way it's grown from just a 1 week event to now the whole of July is Hitchin Festival. You know, we say to people, just don't plan to go away anywhere in July because there's just so much going So that's a plus. The fact that we've been fortunate to keep the town quite well occupied. Our vacancy rate's always been low, even during this last recession, where some of the coastal towns were reporting 30-35% vacancy rates. 1 in 3 shops empty, and I think the highest ours ever went to was about 6.8%, so that was good. The level of activity now in the marketplace, is always something going on, except in the very depths of winter in January, but even some brave souls go out there then. So there are lots of things I think that Hitchin can be proud of. There's lots still to do, but yeah, good progress so far, I think you'd say. We've always made a point that successful town centre partnerships are, it's the 3 C's, it's commerce, community and council linked together, and that's the way it works, and that's the way it succeeds. Individual councillors are hugely supportive, Hitchin councillors, and we're delighted to work with them. We just wish they had a bit more delegated authority and budget to help out with. The community are very good. Hitchin Forum, the Hitchin Society, Hitchin Historical Society, number of community organisations that are now members of Hitchin Initiative as well. So that works well, and people are hugely appreciative of the work that we do. And businesses, well, you couldn't ask to work for a better business community. Almost to a man and a woman. They're a fantastic bunch to work for. We've just started a group called Hitchin the Next Generation, because we've got to think about where we're going to be in 5-10 years' time. You know, I'm past retirement age now. I'm not about to shuffle off, but it's something we have to give a thought to, so that we are putting in place a legacy, if you like, to ensure that the good work continues.